Welcome to HFY Galaxies, where humanity's place in the stars isn't just a story, it's a battle for survival, honor, and the future of the galaxy. What would happen if humans weren't just bystanders in the vast universe, but the ones to stand tall and defend the innocent, fight off tyrannical empires, and shape the future of interstellar alliances? In this galaxy, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. Get ready for epic battles, unexpected alliances, and a journey through the stars like you've never seen before. Join us as we explore the uncharted frontiers and uncover the mysteries of space one story at a time. The sky above Velora Prime was ablaze with a fiery red hue, a harrowing signal of the planet's destruction. Plumes of smoke spiraled into the darkening sky as explosions echoed across the vast expanse. The massive orbital defense platforms that once shielded the planet had been reduced to rubble, their remnants falling to the surface in a fiery rain. The thundering roar of explosions reverberated through the air as chaos unfolded below. Dr. Elira stood by the tall glass window of her laboratory, her delicate hands trembling slightly, though she remained rooted to the spot. The tremors of distant explosions rattled the walls of the building. Her sharp eyes remained fixed on the fiery horizon, where the last remnants of Velora's once pristine colonies were swallowed by the relentless Xeric warship fleet. The enemy was near. The world was slipping away from her, and the chilling sound of silence was broken only by the occasional rumble of an explosion. She could hear the faint cries of panic from the citizens outside, but their voices felt distant now, nothing more than fleeting echoes in a world already lost to time. The Xeric had decimated the outer colonies, sweeping through them with a ruthlessness that left no survivors. Now, their warships loomed just beyond the atmosphere, preparing for the final strike. It was only a matter of time before they reached the heart of Velora Prime itself. With every breath, Dr. Elira could feel the weight of the hopelessness sinking deeper into her chest. There was no escaping the inevitable. She had seen it all. The carnage. The destruction. The lives lost. The failure to protect her people. Her heart beat heavy, each pulse a reminder of the lives she couldn't save. The Xeric were too powerful, their numbers too vast. Her people's pleas for peace had fallen on deaf ears. The galaxy would not answer. She had known this moment was coming, and yet, the reality still felt unbearable. With a slow, deliberate movement, Dr. Elira turned away from the window. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal of the laboratory's desk, the quantum communication device humming softly, waiting. It was the last hope for her people, the only connection to the universe beyond. The machine had never been tested beyond their solar system, and now, it was their only chance. A chance to reach out. A last plea into the stars. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest, before stepping toward the device. The sound of her own footsteps felt deafening in the stillness of the room, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the scanner. The uncertainty gnawed at her, but the moment for hesitation had passed. There was no more time to waste. Dr. Elira placed her palm on the scanner, feeling the cool surface beneath her skin. She spoke into the device, her voice steady, but her heart heavy with the knowledge that this might be the last message her people would ever send. This is Dr. Elira from the Velorian people. Our worlds are under attack. We plead for any who can hear us to come to our aid. We have advanced knowledge, but no defense. We offer it freely. Please, help us. As she finished the message, her voice trembled slightly, the final words echoing in the empty room. She pressed the button, and the machine hummed louder, its energy consuming all that remained. The transmission began, sending the desperate message into the void of space, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear it. Dr. Elira stepped back, her eyes once again drawn to the window, where the flames of destruction danced across the sky. The Xeric fleet was almost there. Would anyone answer? Would anyone come? The answer, as she stared at the falling sky, seemed distant, just another empty whisper carried away by the winds of fate. I don't know, she whispered softly, almost to herself. I don't know if anyone will hear us. She watched as the world she knew slipped further into darkness, but a glimmer of hope flickered in her heart, a faint, fragile thread in the vastness of the universe. The universe was vast, and in its infinite stretches, perhaps, just perhaps, someone would answer. The night had settled over Earth, a blanket of silence falling across the United Earth Defense Forces headquarters. Inside the command center, the dim glow of consoles illuminated the faces of the few night shift officers on duty. Among them was Lila Vance, a young and dedicated communication officer. The quiet hum of machinery and the occasional beep from her terminal were the usual soundtrack to her solitary hours of monitoring routine space traffic. But tonight, the air felt different, as if something unseen was lurking just beyond the veil. The hum of her console shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a pulse, and then there it was, a strange distortion, a ripple in the regular flow of signals. It wasn't supposed to happen. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, eyes narrowing in confusion as an encrypted signal began to flood her screen. The frequencies were unlike any she had encountered. Quantum fluctuations. Alien. There was no doubt in her mind, this was something extraordinary. She pressed a few keys, trying to isolate the signal, and her heart began to race. This wasn't just a stray transmission, it demanded immediate attention. There was urgency behind it, something raw and desperate. She felt it in her bones. Without thinking, Lila reached for the intercom. Commander Roland, we have an encrypted alien transmission, something's not right. There was a brief pause before the gravelly voice of Commander Roland crackled through the speakers. Is it a false alarm, Vance? His voice was calm, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath it. The commander, experienced and always composed, had seen countless signals over the years, but there was something in Lila's tone that made him sit up straighter. No, sir, she replied, her voice tight with the tension building in her chest. This is something different. It's quantum, alien, and it's calling for help. Roland stood from his desk, his chair scraping against the floor as he moved swiftly toward her station. The room was filled with a low hum of machines, but now, it felt like the weight of the universe had fallen upon them. Lila's fingers hovered over the keys, her mind racing to decipher the encoded message. The transmission flickered on the screen, struggling to stabilize. We're translating it now, Lila said, her voice steady despite the nerves that twisted in her stomach. Slowly, the image of an alien appeared on the screen, a slender figure with blue skin, large, expressive eyes filled with fear and desperation. Her mouth moved, and a distorted voice followed. The message was translated into Earth's language, but the words carried a weight far beyond mere sound. The voice was fragile, and yet it held the power of an entire species on the brink of annihilation. This is Dr. Elira of the Velorian people. Our worlds are under attack. We plead for any who can hear us to come to our aid. We have advanced knowledge, but no defense. Please, help us. The words hung in the air long after the message ended, their weight sinking into the hearts of everyone in the room. Lila stared at the screen, her mind reeling from the implications. Dr. Elira, the alien voice in their midst, was not just asking for help, she was begging for survival. Lila could hear the fear in the message, the raw desperation. Commander Roland stood frozen, staring at the screen in stunned silence. The Velorians were not a species Earth had ever encountered, and the Xeric the attackers were a new, unknown threat. The quiet in the room was thick, oppressive. It felt as if time itself had frozen. Roland broke the silence with a slow exhale, his voice a low murmur, more to himself than to anyone else. We've never seen anything like this. A peaceful species, calling for help against a dominant alien race. He turned towards Lila, his eyes sharp. This is a first contact situation, Vance. Lila nodded, the reality of what they were facing slowly dawning on her. This wasn't just another routine transmission. This was history unfolding, right here, right now. A new chapter in humanity's story, one that could change everything. Roland paced, his boots echoing in the stillness of the command center. We need to decide now, do we help? His voice was heavy with the weight of the decision, and Lila could hear the tension in his words. Every instinct in her told her they had to respond, but the gravity of the situation was almost too much to bear. The unknown loomed large. What would the Zarek do if they knew Earth had intervened? Would they become a target? Would this spark an intergalactic war? So many unknowns, so many risks, but Lila felt something stir inside her, a sense of duty, a deep-rooted belief that this was the right thing to do. Lila's gaze returned to the screen, where Dr. Elira's image flickered, a silent plea still hanging in the air. The Velorians were out there, fighting for their survival. And despite the vastness of space and the isolation they must have felt, they had reached out, seeking humanity's help. Lila turned to Commander Roland, her voice steady, despite the tremor of emotion. We can't ignore this. We can't turn our backs. If we don't help them, who will? Roland paused for a moment, looking out into the vast unknown. His expression was unreadable, but when he spoke, there was a fire in his words. You're right, Vance. We answer their call. Humanity doesn't stand by when the innocent are in danger. A new resolve filled the room. The first step had been taken. The fate of a peaceful species, and possibly the future of humanity, was now intertwined with the stars above. And for better or worse, Earth's journey into the unknown had just begun. The room was heavy with the hum of anxious voices and the faint rustle of papers as the United Earth Council convened in the high-security chambers beneath the Colorado Mountains. The walls, lined with sleek, metallic panels, seemed to hum with the tension in the air. Around the large, circular table sat Earth's most powerful military and political leaders, their faces etched with the weight of the moment. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the snow-capped peaks, but inside, the room was filled with an uncomfortable warmth, a heat generated not from the glow of lights, but from the simmering debate that had taken hold of the council. At the center of the room, General Calvin stood, his voice booming with conviction as he spoke. He was a tall man, graying at the temples, his sharp features hardened from years of service. His gaze swept across the room, scanning each face, challenging them to see reason. The recent alien distress signal had caught everyone off guard, and now they were faced with a choice that could alter the future of humanity. We can't just rush into this, General Calvin said, his voice steady but firm. We don't even know who we're dealing with. The Zarek Empire? A species we've never encountered, and now, we're supposed to risk everything to help them? Our first duty is to protect Earth, not to be dragged into a war we don't fully understand. He let his words sink in, eyes narrowing as he glanced around the room. Our resources are limited. We don't know what we're up against. Our primary objective should be to safeguard humanity, not to put our forces in harm's way for a species we know nothing about. His words lingered in the air, and a murmur rippled through the council members. A few nodded in agreement, their brows furrowed in deep concern. It made sense, after all, protecting Earth and its people came first. The galaxy was vast, and the unknowns of space were filled with dangers that humanity had yet to fully comprehend. But as the murmurs grew louder, another voice rose above the rest, a voice filled with passion, with a vision for something greater than mere survival. Admiral Taylor, a woman whose presence commanded respect, leaned forward. Her posture was unwavering, her dark eyes fixed on the council members as she spoke. She was no stranger to the weight of leadership, having served in the toughest battles humanity had faced. Her voice, though calm, was filled with a quiet intensity that carried a force all its own. If we ignore this, what does it say about us? Admiral Taylor's words rang out, cutting through the tension. If we stand by when the galaxy calls for help, who will come when it's our turn? Her gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of each council member. We have the power to make a difference. This is a chance to show what humanity truly stands for, to stand up when others are too weak, too afraid, or too isolated to act. The room fell silent. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, there was no sound but the faint thrum of the ventilation system, the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Every member of the council seemed to hold their breath, caught between the fear of the unknown and the call to do something greater than themselves. Admiral Taylor's voice softened, but it was no less firm. This isn't just about defending Earth. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity is capable of more than just surviving. We are capable of protecting the innocent, of standing against tyranny. If we turn our backs now, what kind of message will we send to the stars? General Calvin's gaze hardened, but it was clear that Admiral Taylor's words had struck a chord with many in the room. There was no denying the moral weight of her argument. The question lingered in the air: could humanity afford to sit idly by when anyone reached out for help? A low murmur of agreement began to ripple through the council, the weight of the decision becoming more palpable with every passing second. Finally, Admiral Taylor, feeling the room shift, straightened. Her voice grew louder, more commanding, as she made her decision clear. "Prepare the Third Fleet for immediate departure," she ordered, her voice unwavering. "Humanity will not sit idle while others suffer." The words seemed to settle over the room like a command, and the members of the council knew, with undeniable certainty, that the course had been set. This was no longer a matter of debate. They would act. The room buzzed with the immediate rush of orders being passed between council members. Maps were pulled up, screens flashed to life, and the once quiet chamber became a flurry of motion as preparations for the fleet's departure began. The decision had been made, and the consequences of that decision would echo across the galaxy. Outside, the sky darkened further, and the first stars began to twinkle against the deepening black. Somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of space, the Velorian people waited. And humanity, in that moment, made its choice. The galaxy might be vast, but humanity would no longer be a mere observer. They were stepping into the unknown, ready to fight not just for their survival, but for the survival of others. The storm was coming. And humanity was ready to strike. The vast expanse of Earth's shipyards stretched before them, a testament to humanity's ambition and its unyielding determination. The yard was alive with activity, a hive of ceaseless motion beneath a cold, starry sky. Above, the moon hovered in silent watch, its pale light casting long shadows over the sprawling complex. It was a scene of frenetic energy, but underneath it all, there was an undeniable sense of purpose. The hum of heavy machinery filled the air, the sound of metal grinding against metal, the rhythmic clank of hatches being sealed. The shipyards, once used for the construction of civilian and trade ships, now teemed with preparations for something far greater. Humanity was not just building vessels, they were building hope. Hope for the Velorians. Hope for the future. Amid the noise, Captain Isabella Shaw walked with quiet resolve across the yard. Her uniform was crisp, her posture straight, but the weight of the mission was evident in the way her eyes scanned the vast expanse of ships. Massive warships, towering and formidable, were taking shape under the watchful eyes of engineers and commanders. These ships, sleek and powerful, were humanity's first true response to the galaxy's call for help. The USS Tempest, the flagship of the fleet, stood out amongst them, its hull gleaming under the lights, like a great beast roused from its slumber, ready for battle. Captain Shaw stopped at the foot of the Tempest, her gaze lifting to take in the full scope of the ship. It was humanity's greatest creation, an embodiment of their strength, their ingenuity, and their desire to protect. The Tempest was a symbol of everything they had built, everything they had become. It was not just a warship, it was their answer to the cry for help, a promise that humanity would not stand by when the galaxy was in peril. Shaw's heart swelled with a quiet pride, but it was tempered by the reality of what lay ahead. She knew the risks. The Xeric Empire was formidable, and Velora Prime was already on the brink of destruction. Yet, in that moment, she felt a deep, unshakable connection to the mission. She wasn't just leading a fleet, she was leading humanity's first step into the greater galaxy, into the unknown. The weight of that responsibility hung heavily on her shoulders, but she embraced it, just as she had embraced every challenge before. She turned as her first officer, Commander Reed, approached. His expression was focused, the lines of worry etched into his face, but his eyes held a shared determination. He handed her a report, his voice low but clear. "Captain, all ships are on schedule. The Tempest is ready for departure in 3 hours. We've finished final calibrations, and the fleet is prepared for the long journey." Captain Shaw nodded, taking the report from him, but her mind was already focused elsewhere. She turned her gaze back to the Tempest, as if the ship could somehow reassure her, bolster her resolve. It was a simple thing, a human instinct to seek comfort in the familiar before stepping into the unknown. "This is it, Reed," she said quietly, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "We're not just fighting for Velora. We're showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. We may be the underdogs in this fight, but we are not without resolve." Reed's eyes softened, and he gave a short nod. He understood. Everyone understood. This wasn't just about defending a planet or defeating an enemy, this was about proving that humanity had the strength, the courage, and the compassion to stand beside those who needed help, no matter the odds. "We'll make sure the Velorians know, humanity stands beside them," Shaw continued, her voice unwavering as she took a step toward the Tempest. Each word, each step, was a promise. Not just to the Velorians, but to every person in the fleet, to every soul on Earth. A promise that they would face the darkness together, and they would not falter. Around her, the crew worked tirelessly, finalizing every detail, ensuring every piece of equipment was in place, every weapon calibrated for the coming conflict. The human fleet was a small force compared to the Xeric Empire's vast armada, but it was one filled with purpose. Each ship, each soldier, each officer was driven by the same unspoken understanding: they were fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting for the survival of a peaceful species. They were fighting to protect what was good in the galaxy. The engines of the Tempest hummed, a low, steady vibration beneath her feet as the final tests were completed. Shaw could feel it, the heartbeat of the ship resonating within her. It was alive as the men and women who had worked so hard to bring it to life. It was their lifeline, and it was ready. Shaw's gaze lingered on the dark horizon, where stars flickered in the distance, far beyond the reach of the human ships. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and unknown. But in that moment, She knew one thing for certain: humanity would not shrink from this challenge. The storm was coming, and humanity would meet it head-on. "Prepare the fleet for departure," she ordered, her voice steady with purpose. "We leave in 3 hours." Her words echoed in the air, a final command before the fleet embarked on its journey. As the officers and engineers scattered to their posts, Shaw turned and walked toward the bridge, her steps measured but determined. The fleet was ready. She was ready. And somewhere, far away, the Velorians were waiting. The vast emptiness of space stretched before the human fleet, a sea of blackness dotted with a cold, distant flicker of stars. The fleet, gathered in tight formation, lay poised at the edge of the unknown, ready to leap into the uncharted depths of the galaxy. The USS Tempest led the charge, its engines humming with quiet power, vibrating beneath Captain Shaw's feet as it prepared to jump into warp speed. The ship's bridge was alive with activity. Officers moved with purpose, their faces tense but focused, the weight of their mission pressing down on them like an invisible force. Every corner of the room was filled with a quiet buzz of communication, the soft hum of machinery working tirelessly to ensure that the fleet would reach its destination. The stars outside were distant, cold, and indifferent, but inside the ship, the heartbeat of humanity raced with determination. Captain Shaw stood before the view screen, her eyes locked on the swirling void ahead. She could feel the gravity of the moment in every fiber of her being. This was at the point of no return. They were not simply embarking on a journey through space. They were heading into the heart of a war, into a battle zone where the stakes were higher than anything humanity had faced before. The Xeric Empire, a ruthless and powerful force, awaited them in the shadows of Velora Prime. The fleet was small compared to the enemy's vast armada, but it was humanity's last, best hope to stop the slaughter of an innocent species. Captain Shaw knew the odds were against them. The fleet's speed was nothing compared to the strength of the Xeric forces. Yet, there was no other option. This was a fight they had to win, not just for Velora, but for the very soul of the galaxy. "Captain," Commander Reed's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone steady but filled with the weight of the unknown. "All ships are ready for the jump. The fleet is prepped for warp speed." Shaw nodded, her face calm but her heart racing. She turned to face him, her eyes steely with resolve. "We strike first," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We strike hard. Velora is counting on us. There's no turning back." The words hung in the air like a battle cry, a final reminder that this was not just a mission, it was a stand. The silence that followed was filled with the unspoken understanding between the crew members. They were all in this together, their fates intertwined with the Velorians and their determination to face the unknown. With a sharp command, Shaw gestured toward the helm. "Initiate warp speed." In that moment, the entire ship seemed to hold its breath. There was no turning back now. The stars outside the window stretched and blurred, their points of light becoming elongated streaks of white as the ship entered warp speed. The fleet followed suit, and in an instant, they were thrust into the unknown. The ship's engines roared to life, the hum vibrating through the air, filling every corner of the bridge with the raw power of their departure. Captain Shaw gripped the edge of the console, feeling the ship surge forward, faster than the mind could comprehend. The familiar backdrop of the stars gave way to a blur of light as the fleet raced through the void, hurtling toward the unknown. Captain Shaw took a deep breath, steadying herself. The adrenaline was already coursing through her veins, but she kept her composure. This was what she had trained for. This was what humanity had fought for, to be ready when the galaxy called, to face the darkness and emerge stronger on the other side. As the ship moved deeper into warp, the hum of the engines filled the space around them, a constant reminder of the journey ahead. The crew moved efficiently, their movements synchronized as they prepared for the challenges ahead. There was no fear, only determination. They knew what they were up against, but they also knew what was at stake. The cold, distant stars outside were no longer their focus. Instead, they were propelled by a singular, powerful thought: the fight for Valora Prime and the fight for all that was good in the galaxy. Captain Shaw turned to her crew, her face resolute. "Stay sharp. We are humanity's first line of defense. We will face this enemy with everything we have." She walked to the observation window, her gaze focused on the dark, infinite space beyond. Somewhere, in the depths of the galaxy, the Valorians were waiting. And humanity, for the first time in history, was about to step onto the galactic stage. The journey had begun. The storm was coming. And humanity would face it head-on. The human fleet emerged from the void of space, entering the orbit of Valora Prime. The planet below was a vision of destruction. The once lush, green continents were now scarred by the fires of battle. Smoke billowed up into the atmosphere, and distant flashes of explosions lit up the sky. Valora Prime, the last refuge of the Valorian people, was under heavy bombardment by the Zarek fleet. Their ships, dark and imposing, loomed like shadows against the battered surface of the planet. It was a terrifying sight, a peaceful world teetering on the brink of annihilation. Captain Shaw stood at the bridge, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest of her chair. Her gaze was locked on the view screen, where Valora Prime hung like a dying star, its fate hanging in the balance. Every inch of her being screamed to act, to move, to protect. The time had come. The choice had been made. The storm was upon them. "Captain, the Zarek fleet has deployed all forces," Lieutenant Cruz reported, his voice tight with urgency. "They are beginning to focus fire on the last defense platforms. It won't be long before they launch a full-scale assault on the surface." Captain Shaw's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. There was no time for hesitation. If they didn't act now, it would be too late for the Valorians. She turned to her crew, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. "Prepare for engagement," Shaw ordered, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We move now. We fight for Valora. We fight for them." As the command left her lips, the USS Tempest and the rest of the human fleet surged forward, moving as one, streaking through space like a flash of light. The Zarek fleet, though enormous, was sluggish, slow to react as the human ships darted between them with speed and precision. The human fleet, smaller but more agile, weaved through the alien vessels, exploiting their size and slower movements. The human ships fired first, their weapons cutting through the darkness of space, launching blistering waves of energy that impacted the Zarek ships with violent force. Explosions erupted across the Zarek fleet. Ships crumpled and split apart in fiery bursts, their shields faltering against the force of humanity's advanced weaponry. The battle was chaotic, a furious dance of destruction. Every ship in the human fleet fought with the same purpose, with the same resolve. Every shot, every maneuver, was a reminder to the Zarek that humanity had come not just to defend, but to strike back. "One Zarek ship disabled, Captain," Lieutenant Cruz called out, his voice strained with the tension of the battle. "But there are still too many of them. We've managed to disable a few ships, but there's a lot more firepower coming our way. They are beginning to regroup." Shaw's jaw clenched. The Zarek were vast, their numbers nearly overwhelming. The humans had thrown the first punch, but the real fight was just beginning. She could feel the heat of the battle in her chest, the urgency of the moment pushing her to act faster, to think quicker. "We don't give them time to regroup," Shaw said, her voice low and fierce. We disrupt them before they have a chance to reorganize. We show them that humanity is not here to play. The human ships moved with unrelenting determination, weaving in and out of the Xeric fleet, launching precision strikes at their weakest points. The Xeric ships, massive and lumbering, struggled to keep up with the rapid movements of their smaller, faster adversaries. Yet, despite their size, the Xeric fleet's firepower was formidable. Energy blasts and missiles flew from their ships, lighting up the darkness of space like fireworks. A few human vessels took the brunt of the hits, their shields flickering and their hulls shaking under the impact. On the bridge of the Tempest, Captain Shaw stood firm, her eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. The sounds of the battle, the beeps and alarms, seemed distant. She could feel the weight of each decision pressing on her. The lives of the Velorians, of her crew, and of humanity itself hung in the balance. "Lieutenant Cruz," Shaw said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. "I want full tactical analysis on the Xeric formations. We need to find their weaknesses and exploit them now." "Yes, Captain," Cruz replied, his fingers flying over his console as he worked to scan the battlefield for any sign of weakness in the Xeric's defense. The human fleet didn't slow down. It accelerated, pushing forward, using every advantage they had. The Xeric were not prepared for this. They were used to overwhelming their enemies through sheer numbers, but humanity's speed, precision, and determination were beginning to turn the tide. Captain Shaw's eyes narrowed as she watched the battle unfold. The Xeric forces were formidable, but the humans had something they didn't: heart. And that heart would carry them through the darkness. "We're not just here to survive," Shaw whispered to herself, her gaze unwavering as she watched the ships of her fleet move into position. "We're here to win." And so, the battle raged on. Humanity, small but unyielding, against the vast, relentless forces of the Xeric Empire. The galaxy watched as the storm broke, as the underdogs made their stand. The fate of Velora Prime, of the Velorians, and perhaps the future of the galaxy itself rested on the outcome of this battle. The battle raged outside, a storm of energy and destruction that shook the very fabric of space. The USS Tempest was at the heart of it, darting through the chaos like a beacon of resistance against the overwhelming Xeric fleet. On the bridge, Captain Shaw stood, her face set in grim determination, her every thought focused on the mission. The flickering lights and the constant hum of the battle around them only heightened the sense of urgency. They were pushing back the Xeric, but they were only one fleet against a galaxy-spanning empire. But inside the ship, there was a new energy, a quiet hum of collaboration between the humans and the Velorians. A group of Velorian refugees had been brought aboard in the early stages of the conflict, their faces weary but determined. They had witnessed the fall of their colonies, the destruction of their people, and now they had brought with them the knowledge that might just turn the tide of the battle. Zeth, a Velorian engineer, was among them. His skin, a pale blue, had once shone with vitality, but now, it was marred by the exhaustion of endless flight and constant danger. Despite this, his eyes were sharp, filled with an understanding that the humans would need to survive this war. Zeth was standing beside Commander Reed, who had been coordinating with him to develop a countermeasure against the Xeric's most dangerous weapon, their hive mind. The Xeric Empire was not just a fleet of ships, it was a vast, interconnected force where every ship, every soldier, operated under the control of a central command. It was the foundation of their power, the glue that held their empire together. If the humans could break that bond, if they could disrupt their coordination, it could shatter the Xeric's strength. Zeth's voice broke through the tension in the room as he studied the data on the screen in front of him, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You humans fight like we've never seen before," he said, his voice calm but filled with a quiet admiration. "Your creativity and resolve, It's what will give you the edge against them. But there is one thing the Zarek cannot prepare for: disruption. He turned to face Captain Shaw, who had approached to listen. There was something different in his eyes now, a kind of respect that had not been present when they first met. The Velorians had been hesitant to trust the humans, their pride still wounded from the destruction of their people. But now, standing in the heart of humanity's warship, with the echoes of their battle cries resonating in the very walls, Zeth knew this was a partnership born of necessity, but one that could be something more. "We have learned much from your tactics, your ability to adapt in the heat of battle," Zeth continued, his gaze lingering on the screen where the Zarek fleet was still regrouping. "But to defeat them, we need to strike at their minds, at their core." The words hung heavy in the room. Shaw's expression hardened, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. She had known this was coming, knew that the battle would be more than just a war of ships. It would be a war of ideas, of ingenuity, of human will against an empire that had conquered and assimilated countless worlds. But hearing Zetha's words, seeing his unwavering faith in humanity, something inside her sparked. It was not just about the weapons they had, it was about their ability to think, to adapt, to defy expectations. Zeth moved to a small station at the back of the room, his fingers gliding over the console. Images flashed across the screen, diagrams of Zarek ships, battle formations, and something more. A small, glowing device appeared on the screen, its design unlike anything the humans had seen before. It was sleek, almost organic in shape, with complex patterns running along its surface. "This," Zeth said, his voice low and filled with a sense of finality, "is a quantum disruption device. It will scramble the Zarek hive mind. For all their strength, they rely on the unity of their consciousness. This device will sever that connection, cause confusion, disrupt their coordination. They won't know who to attack, where to move, what to do. It will create chaos within their fleet, chaos we can exploit." Captain Shaw moved closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing as she examined the device. It was a simple concept, but one so powerful it could shift the balance of the entire battle. The thought of turning the tide of war with this small piece of technology filled her with a strange mixture of hope and dread. The device was their lifeline, their only hope of breaking through the Zarek's overwhelming might. "We need to deploy it, Zeth," Shaw said, her voice steady. "Can it be done?" Zeth nodded, his expression grave. "It can be done. But we must get close enough to the Zarek command ship to deploy it. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to succeed." The weight of the mission hung in the air like a storm cloud. Shaw knew the risks. Getting close to the Zarek command ship meant going deep into their territory, facing the heart of their fleet. But it was their only chance. The Velorians were depending on them. Earth was depending on them. "We'll do it," Shaw said, her voice resolute, the weight of the decision settling over her like armor. "Prepare the device. We'll get as close as we need to, and we'll make sure it works." Zetha's eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, the distance between their species seemed to close. They were no longer just humans and Velorians. They were allies, bound by a common cause. As Zeth turned to finalize the device, Shaw looked out the window at the distant, looming form of the Zarek command ship, a massive fortress of dark metal. She knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time since the war had begun, she felt a spark of hope, a hope that, against all odds, humanity might just have the edge it needed to survive. "Let's show them what we can do," Shaw whispered, her gaze never leaving the looming Zarek ship. The USS Tempest and its fleet of human warships cut through the void of space like a blade, their engines screaming with determination as they raced toward the heart of the Zarek command ship. The fleet was battered, shields flickering, hulls scarred by the relentless onslaught, but their resolve had never been stronger. The hum of the engines resonated deep within the ship, vibrating through the bones of those aboard. They were moving toward the core of the enemy's strength, but they were not afraid. The cold expanse of space stretched endlessly in every direction, the Xeric fleet looming ahead in a tight formation. Their massive ships, dark and menacing, seemed almost invincible as they floated in front of the central command ship, their fortress in the stars. The Tempest pressed forward, flanked by other vessels of the human fleet, now a swarm of light and fire. Each ship knew their role, each officer and crew member braced for what was to come. On board the Tempest, Major Galactic stood in the heart of the command center, a fierce determination in his eyes. He was older than most, worn by years of service, but there was no time for fatigue, no time for doubt. The mission was too critical. The fate of Elora, of Earth, of the entire galaxy, depended on the success of this final strike. His team stood ready behind him, armed with a weapon they had worked so hard to prepare, the quantum disruption device. The device was their last hope, the key to crippling the Xeric Empire's most dangerous weapon, their hive mind, the force that bound their fleet together in perfect coordination. Without it, they would be nothing more than a chaotic mass of ships, easy to pick off one by one. "Let's make it count," Garrett murmured to his team, his voice steady. The quiet intensity of his words resonated with every person in the room, a silent vow to carry out the mission no matter the cost. They knew what was at stake. There would be no turning back. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment to end the war, once and for all. "This ends now," Garrett said, turning toward the airlock. His eyes locked with his team's, each of them nodding in unison. For humanity, for Velora. As the airlock sealed behind them, the team moved swiftly through the corridors of the Tempest, their steps quick but measured. The sounds of battle echoed in the distance, but there was no hesitation in their movements. The objective was clear: infiltrate the Xeric flagship, plant a device in the heart of their command center, and disrupt the central connection that had made the Xeric fleet so unstoppable. Outside, the human fleet engaged the Xeric forces with coordinated precision. The massive Xeric ships, though formidable, were beginning to falter. The first waves of human ships darted in and out of the enemy's formation, creating a chaotic battlefield of flashing lights and explosions. The Xeric ships, slow to adapt, found themselves overwhelmed by the rapid movements of the human fleet. Their shields flickered and sparked under the constant barrage of human fire. The human fleet was fighting with everything they had, every weapon, every maneuver designed to take advantage of the Xeric's unyielding confidence. As the Xeric ships were forced to respond, their formation began to unravel. The once organized fleet now looked like a disjointed cluster, their movements erratic and confused. Meanwhile, aboard the Xeric command ship, Garrett's team infiltrated their way through the heart of the fortress, the hum of the ship's machinery a constant reminder of the danger they faced. The corridors were dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights, but they didn't stop. Every step they took brought them closer to the core of the Xeric's command center. The air was thick with tension as Garrett and his team approached the main control room. They could feel the weight of the moment, the knowledge that the fate of billions rested on the success of their mission. This was their final chance, and they were willing to give everything for it. Inside the command center, the quantum disruption device was placed in the heart of the Xeric control network. The team worked quickly, their hands steady despite the pressure mounting around them. Garrett activated the device, watching as it hummed to life. It sent a pulse through the ship, a wave of energy that spread like wildfire through the Xeric fleet. Across the stars, the effect was immediate. The Xeric fleet, once a perfectly coordinated force, now fell into disarray. Their ships, once synchronized in their movements, became nothing more than isolated entities, each one trying to fight the humans on its own. The hive mind that had been their strength, their unity, was gone. It was as if the Zarek had lost their souls, each ship now struggling to function without the central guidance. On the Tempest, Captain Shaw watched the chaos unfold through the tactical displays. The once mighty Zarek fleet, powerful and relentless, was now faltering. Their coordination had collapsed, and the human fleet took full advantage. The Zarek ships, once a symbol of dominance, were now vulnerable, easy targets for the human fleet's rapid strikes. The tide of the battle had shifted in an instant. "Now," Captain Shaw whispered, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Now, we end this." The human fleet surged forward, relentless in their pursuit. The Zarek fleet, now broken and disoriented, was easy prey. In the distance, the flagship, once an invincible bastion of power, was now just another ship in the chaos of battle. The Zarek had been outmaneuvered, their hive mind shattered, and humanity had finally found its footing. In the heart of the command center, Major Garrett's team stood victorious. The device had done its work. The Zarek were no longer a unified force. They had disrupted their will to fight, and now, they were vulnerable. "This is it," Garrett said, his voice steady, but filled with a sense of relief. "We've done it." The war was not over, but this was the turning point, the moment the Zarek Empire's grip on the galaxy began to falter. And humanity, the underdog, had proven they could stand against even the most formidable enemies. The battle wasn't over yet, but the storm had been unleashed, and the Zarek would never be the same. The air over Valora Prime was still heavy with the remnants of battle. The planet, scarred and bruised from the weeks of relentless bombardment, now stood on the precipice of rebirth. The once crimson sky, marred by smoke and fire, had slowly begun to clear. The distant stars, now shining through the haze, seemed almost like a promise, a glimmer of hope after a storm that had nearly torn everything apart. The echoes of the last explosive strikes had faded, leaving behind an eerie, almost unnatural silence. The Zarek fleet, once a towering and terrifying presence, had retreated. Their massive ships, so certain of their victory just days before, now scattered like broken shadows across the stars. It was a victory, a moment that felt almost too fragile to be true. Humanity, with its fleet battered and exhausted, had defied the odds. They had struck at the heart of the Zarek's power, disabling the planet-killer weapon that had threatened to erase Valora from existence. In the wake of the chaos, Captain Shaw stood at the helm of the USS Tempest, her gaze steady as she looked out at the recovery unfolding before her. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. They had saved Valora Prime, but the true test had only just begun. The loss of the Zarek's weapon was a crushing blow to their forces, but their retreat didn't guarantee peace. The Zarek were a proud empire, and the question of whether they would accept defeat or fight on remained in the balance. But for now, there was time to breathe. Time to look at the wreckage and wonder how much of it could be rebuilt. Time to reflect on the cost of this victory, on the lives that had been lost, on the sacrifices made, on the resilience shown by those who refused to surrender. Supreme Warlord Uruk, the figurehead of the Zarek Empire's might, was now a prisoner aboard the Tempest. His massive form, once a symbol of overwhelming power, now sat subdued in the brig, shackled and broken. His eyes, full of malice and pride just days before, now held a mixture of confusion and defeat. The Zarek had underestimated humanity, and now, Uruk was a living reminder of that arrogance. The quiet hum of the ship's corridors was broken by the soft tread of boots. Captain Shaw's footsteps echoed as she made her way to the meeting chamber, where representatives from Earth and Valora had gathered. The room, once cold and sterile, now felt charged with anticipation. History was being made here, a moment that would change the course of the galaxy. Shaw entered, her expression resolute, but there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes, a quiet sense of accomplishment, mixed with the weight of what had come before. The Velorian leaders stood tall, their blue skin now free of the marks of war. Beside them were the human ambassadors, ready to negotiate the terms of a new future. Dr. Elira, the Velorian scientist who had once sent out that desperate plea for help, now stood at the front, her face no longer marked by the terror of uncertainty. Instead, there was a glimmer of hope, a realization that this moment, this fragile victory, was only the beginning. As the accords were signed, the weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the room. It was not just a piece of paper being signed. It was a promise that Earth would stand beside Velora, that humanity would be a protector, not a conqueror. The pen scratched against the paper, and in that simple act, a new alliance was born. Captain Shaw stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of the entire fleet behind it. "We're not here to conquer," she said, her tone firm but filled with a quiet warmth. "We're here to protect. And as long as there's a call for help, humanity will always answer." Her words, simple and direct, were a promise to the galaxy, one that would echo far beyond the confines of Velora Prime. The human race had stepped onto the galactic stage, not as invaders or conquerors, but as guardians. They had answered the call when no one else would. And now, with their resolve proven, they had forged an alliance that could stand against the darkness of the universe. The Velorians, their heads held high, met Captain Shaw's gaze. There was a mutual respect between them now, born from shared sacrifice, shared survival. They knew, as did humanity, that the future would not be easy. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But in this moment, they had something far more powerful than weapons or technology. They had hope. And with it, they had the strength to face whatever came next. The room, once filled with the tension of war, now hummed with the energy of something new, a beginning. And as the stars outside began to shine brighter in the newfound peace, the promise of a united future filled the air. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it stood for, and in return, the galaxy had opened its doors to them. Together, they would face the unknown. Together, they would build a future, stronger than any one species could achieve alone. The battle was over. But the true work, the real journey, was just beginning. The soft hum of the USS Tempest echoed in the quiet aftermath of the battle, a sound that was now a symbol of both triumph and the heavy toll it had taken. The war had left its scars on the ships, on the people, and on the very fabric of the galaxy. Yet, in the midst of the destruction, a new sense of purpose had emerged, like the first rays of light breaking through a long, dark night. Humanity had done the impossible. They had not only survived but had become the turning point in a war that had seemed destined for one side's victory. No longer just the isolated inhabitants of a small, blue planet, Earth was now part of something greater, a vast, interstellar community where alliances were forged, and where the future would be shaped by those who were willing to fight for peace. Admiral Taylor stood at the front of the command center, her back straight, her gaze far off as she looked out at the endless expanse of stars through the viewport. The battles, the victories, and the sacrifices all seemed to blur together in her mind, yet there was clarity in this moment. Humanity had proven its resolve, and now, they stood on the precipice of something monumental. The unknown, once a source of fear, now stretched before them as a vast opportunity. "Today we made history," Admiral Taylor said softly, but her words carried the weight of 1,000 lifetimes of struggle. The crew of the Tempest had gathered around her, some still in their battle fatigues, others already starting the long process of recovery. They were not just soldiers, they were the embodiment of humanity's courage, unity, and hope. But tomorrow, We make the future. Her voice rang out, strong and clear, and with it, the realization of how far humanity had come. From a small, isolated planet on the edge of a vast universe to a force that could stand shoulder to shoulder with galactic civilizations. The war was not over, but the battle for their place in the galaxy had been won. Humanity had proven that they would not simply be passive observers. They were now part of the galactic conversation, and their presence would be felt. The crew nodded, their faces a mix of exhaustion and pride. They had walked through the fires of battle together, and now they stood at the threshold of a new era. The galaxy, vast and full of both danger and promise, lay ahead. But for the first time, humanity was no longer a small, fragile species hoping to survive. It was a force that could shape the future. On the bridge of the Tempest, Captain Shaw stood beside Admiral Taylor, her gaze lingering on the stars that now seemed so close, almost within reach. She thought back to the battles, the countless moments where the outcome had seemed uncertain. But they had made it through. They had fought not just for their survival, but for a future where they could stand as equals among the stars. "Do you ever wonder," Captain Shaw said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what's out there waiting for us?" Admiral Taylor looked at her, a faint smile on her lips. "Every day." It was a smile that carried with it a deep understanding of what lay ahead. The journey was far from over, and the galaxy was full of unknowns, both beautiful and terrifying. Yet humanity had shown that, no matter the challenge, they would face it with strength, creativity, and resolve. They would fight for peace. They would fight for their place in the galaxy. The silence in the room deepened, but it wasn't the silence of fear or uncertainty. It was the silence of something much greater, of knowing that the impossible had been achieved and that from this moment forward, humanity would never be the same. Admiral Taylor took a deep breath, her eyes turning toward the distant stars. The promise of the future lingered in the air, full of both hope and the knowledge that there would always be more to fight for, more to protect. The journey was just beginning, and humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. "We've made history," Admiral Taylor said again, her voice steady and filled with purpose. "But the real work begins now. We've shown the galaxy who we are. And we will continue to prove it, time and time again." The crew gathered around her, their hearts filled with the same determination. They had answered the call for peace and justice, and now they would stand as the galaxy's guardians. And as the Tempest moved further into the depths of space, the stars around them seemed to shine a little brighter, as if welcoming humanity into their fold. The future was theirs to shape, and the galaxy would never forget the day humanity stood up, united, and ready to fight for the peace they knew was possible. As humanity takes its first steps into a galaxy full of wonders and dangers, remember, this is just the beginning. The future is unwritten, and the choices we make now will echo across the stars. What will humanity do next? The galaxy is vast, but together, there's no enemy too great, no challenge too impossible. What do you think lies beyond the stars? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this is only the beginning of our journey, and we want you to be a part of it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories from the stars. Together, let's prove that when humanity stands united, nothing is beyond our reach. This introduction and conclusion are designed to capture curiosity, engage your audience emotionally, and invite them to become part of the journey you're telling on your channel. It leaves the viewer excited to come back for more while encouraging interaction through comments.